Our preaching passage today is from Ecclesiastes 5, verses 18 through 20. This is what I have observed to be good, Solomon says, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them, for this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. So, this is the perfect job joke. My first job was working in an orange juice factory, but I got canned. Couldn't concentrate. And after that, I tried to be a tailor, but I just wasn't suited for it, mainly because it was a so-so job. Next, I tried working in a muffler factory, but that was too exhausting. I managed to get a good job working for a pool maintenance company, but the work was just too draining. And then I worked in the woods as a lumberjack, but I just couldn't hack it, so they gave me the axe. You don't have to laugh at these, it's okay. I do understand. So then I got a job in a workout center, but they said I wasn't fit for the job. And after many years of trying to find steady work, I finally got a job as a historian, only to realize there was no future in it. I studied a long time to become a doctor, but I didn't have any patience. My best job was being a musician, but eventually I found out I wasn't noteworthy. I became a professional fisherman, but discovered that I couldn't live on my net income. My last job was, thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate that. My last job was working at Starbucks, but I had to quit because it was always the same old grind. And so I retired and found I'm perfect for the job. We're talking about work today. I first began to think about work when I started my ministry. It was the second little church that I was appointed to. And I was in the hardware store. I miss hardware stores. We don't have many hardware stores. I have to drive to Van Buren if I want a hardware store. It's the only one around anymore. But I was in the hardware store buying something, and this older man walked up behind me, and he had, like 50 little tiny parts that he was juggling in his hand, and I said, go ahead of me, so he could lay them down on the counter, and he did. And after I offered for him to go ahead, he started talking to me, and he said to me, literally, there were tears in his eyes. He said to me, I can't hardly work anymore. It began kind of a journey for me thinking about work because I realized how necessary and how important work was to this gentleman. Work. He needed it. He wanted it. And he wasn't able to do it anymore. So there's two ways that we're raised to think about work. And I'm going to ask you if this is the message you were raised with. The first one says, we work because we have to. It's how we survive. If we want to be a productive member of society, if we want to have food, if we want to have shelter, you have to work. Anybody raised with that message? Few hands coming up? All of us, right? In many ways, that's the way. Here's the other way that maybe some of you were raised. Work is a privilege. We get to work. Work is fun. It's stimulating. It's enjoyable. And here's the biggest piece for today. Work is a gift from God. Were any of you raised with that message? It's not a common American pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get on with it kind of message, is it? No, it's not. But it's the truth. I used to lead a Monday night Bible study in one of my churches. And there was a gentleman there, his name's Tom Mosier. He was an eye doctor. Tom was one of the people in the Bible study that kept you honest, okay? Because he asked questions, a lot of questions. When you thought you had answered the question, he still had questions, to ask. And one day I said in the Bible study at evening, I said, work is a gift from God. Well, Tom took exception to that. He says, no way, we have to work. So which message did Tom grow up with? It was the first one, wasn't it? The one most of us grew up with. We have to work. Now, Tom isn't one to let things go. I'll tell you that. So the next Monday night, Tom showed up, and the first thing he had to say was, oh my goodness, you're right. Tom had spent the week looking up every mention of work or labor in the Bible. He couldn't believe how many times it was talked about, and he couldn't believe that I was right. Rhonda never believes it either, but sometimes I am. Yeah. He said, you're right. Work is a gift from God. He gives it to us because He knows we need it. We need work in our lives. This is Ecclesiastes 3:12 and 13. I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every person should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. And this is Ecclesiastes 5:19. As for every person to whom God has given riches and wealth, and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage, and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. When we are privileged to work, when we're blessed to be able to work, it changes how we work. Did you know that? When we got that second message instead of that first one, the first one was we have to work to survive. The second one is we get to work. What a gift that God has given us. When we believe that second one, it changes how we work. This is Colossians 3:23 and 24. You do not work for other people. Whatever you do in your job, do it with all of your heart, because God gave you this work to do. It is God that you work for in an audience of one. It's amazing because there really is no job that we can't do for Him and that we shouldn't be doing for God. And if you think about God is the one that you're trying to please in your job, it's amazing how you approach your job. It's different than the way you would approach it if you have to do it in order to survive. So, one of the things it says in this passage is doing it with all your heart. Whatever you do in your job, do it with all of your heart. So I've got a few things I was thinking about when it comes to doing it with all your heart. What does that really mean? The first one is be totally honest in your work. Totally honest. I had a fellow that owned several small companies in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and this person was really into honesty from his employees. Now, what owner wouldn't be, right? But he set a kind of a test for his employees. He put stamps in the drawer of his secretary. And he put them there for good reason, because she had things to mail on a regular basis, and so the stamps were there. But at the end of each day, this rather obsessed owner would go to the desk and count the number of stamps that were in the desk. I saw him counting those stamps one time. I said, "What's that about?" He said, he said, if a person isn't honest, if they think it's okay to take a stamp for their personal use, they won't be honest in other things either. And if he found a stamp missing, guess what? That person was gone right now. Doing a job with all of your heart means being totally honest. We don't fudge our mileage, when we're turning in that mileage thing. We don't embellish the truth. We don't doctor our time card. And when we make a mistake, we own up to it. It's hard to be totally honest in your job. But doing it with all of your heart, that's what it means. The second thing I have is we find joy in our labor. Now, joy is one of those difficult words, and we've talked about it before already here. What is joy? It's not being happy all the time, because we all know there's aspects of any job that you're going to do that isn't going to be fun, is it? You do it because it's part of the job. You do it because it gives you satisfaction that you accomplished it well, even if it wasn't fun. So I'll describe joy as maybe a deep-seated satisfaction. It's the kind of work you do that at the end of the day you can sleep without any problem, right? You can sleep well because you know you did a good job. When we accept that work is a privilege, we're grateful for all the rewards. We're grateful for the opportunity to work. When I was very young, my dad was an apprentice journeyman electrician. So he was working and he was going to school, and his pay was $35 a week. So Dad would get paid on Friday, and he would go to the bank and he would cash his check, and he would put the $35 in his wallet, and he would walk around all weekend with that $35 in his wallet. Sometime on Sunday afternoon, probably, he would take the $35 out of his wallet and give it to Mom. Yeah, because she paid the bills and what have you. But for just a little bit of time, Dad got to enjoy the fact that he had the fruits of his labor in his pocket, and he got to walk around with it, and it gave him joy to know that he'd done a good job. This is Job 34:11. For he repays people according to their work and gives people a reward according to his way. And Ecclesiastes 2:24, nothing is better for a person let me try that again. Nothing is better for a person than that they should eat and drink and that their souls should enjoy good in their labor. Third one, we're still talking about what it is to do it with all of your heart. The third one is we do our work well. Proverbs 18:9, he who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer. That's kind of strong, isn't it? Have you heard of silent quitting? It's a new term. I've been reading about it in various news feeds. Silent quitting. It's kind of come with this work at home thing. So it means doing the absolute minimum to keep your job. Silent quitting. They don't do any more than they have to. They get paid the same as if they had done a wonderful job. Sound right to you? Doesn't sound right to me. If you're going to take a job, make a commitment, we're supposed to do our work well. You know, if we think that we do our work in order to please the most important and powerful person related to our job, then we know that we want to make a good impression. I mean, think about it. If you know the bigwigs are coming and they're taking a tour of your workplace, what are you going to do? You're going to put on your best face, right? You're going to clean your desk. You're going to have everything in order. You're going to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, and you're going to show them around, and you're going to do the very best job and make the very best impression that you can make under the circumstances. There was a fellow who was restoring the paint job on a custom car. Now, the custom car had been built in the early 60s sometime. I watch car shows. I dream about fixing up a car. I don't fix up cars, but I at least like to watch the car shows where they're fixing up cars. And this car that had been designed and built in the early 60s, this custom car, had a very unique paint job. And it had been on the covers of magazines at the time. It was a famous vehicle. And the job was to restore that car to its original pristine condition. And they hired a person to replicate that original paint job, intricate paint job that had been done on the car. And this person had a regular job, so they were working on the car in the evenings and at night, and it took them several months in order to get this paint job exactly right, to look exactly the way that it did when it was first made. Now, why do you think it was so important to this person to get that paint job exactly, perfectly right? Well, it turns out that at the reveal of this finished car, the original designer and builder was going to be there to see that car. If you think that you're doing your work for the original designer and builder, you're going to do a great job, aren't you? And that's who we do our work for God Himself, the one who designed and built each and every one of us. And finally, doing it with all your heart means to serve. To serve. 1 Peter 4:10, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Now, I'm going to tell you two little stories here. One of them is an absolute contrast to the other, and you can figure out maybe which one is the best course of action. When I owned my little company, one day I came to work on a Monday morning, and my executive secretary wasn't there. Without any notice, she left to go work for another company. Not even a note. Took me a couple days to figure out that she wasn't sick or had been in a car accident or something. Just disappeared. Went to a competitor. That's why she didn't tell me about it. To do the job for them. In the meantime, I had a lady that worked for her, for the executive secretary, and I knew she was fully capable of doing the job. I knew that she already knew most of the job because she had been working beside her, and I asked her to take the position of executive secretary. Now, there's lots of ways you could respond to that, right? I mean, it was a promotion, it was a raise in pay, it was an elevated level of trust within the company. All of those things would excite a lot of people. It scared her to death. She wasn't even sure she wanted to do it. And I said to her, why don't you try it for a couple weeks and let's see how it goes. A lot of us grow up with the messages that aren't very positive in our life, right? And some of you may have had that. You'll never amount to anything, right? You're no good. You should be more like your sister or brother or somebody like that, the one that's revered within the family. You're not smart. You're not quick enough. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. Some of us grew up with a lot of negative messages. And this woman who I offered the promotion to, that was her life. She had grown up with all these not smart enough, not pretty enough, not good enough messages in her head. And you know what? You hear that stuff long enough and you believe it, don't you? And you believe it. The good news is she did an amazing job. She gained a lot of confidence. That was one thing I handled pretty well. Now I'm going to tell you the other story. We were going to a show to show some of our products, a trade show. And I asked one of the workers out in the plant to build me a special platform. And I drew it all out for him, and I explained the materials that I needed it made of, and the size and the shape and all of this. And I needed it in time to take to the show because it was one of the things that we were setting our product on. And so I had given him very specific instructions on how to do it. Well, it was above and beyond his normal job. It wasn't something that would normally... So he stayed after hours. He worked on the weekend in order to build this thing for me. So I'm headed to the show. It starts on Monday morning. I walk in on Sunday afternoon to pick up this thing that he made for me, and it isn't right. Oh, he made it exactly the way I asked him to, but he wanted to do an extra special good job, see? And so he carpeted it, the platform, and he put all this special aluminum trim around it. Well, what he didn't know was I specifically asked for it to be built in a very specific way because it fit with other pieces that were going to be there. And all the things he had added to it meant it wouldn't work anymore. Well, I was mad. Yeah. And so I ripped the trim off of the thing, and I ripped the carpet off of the thing, and I wadded it all up in a pretzel ball and laid it on his toolbox in the shop. Loaded what I needed into the car and headed for the show. What do you think the message was that I sent to him? Oh, I didn't just send it to him, I gave it to the whole shop because they all saw that this fellow's work was balled up on top of his toolbox. Not too good, huh? I made a lot of mistakes like that in my life. Here's a fellow who was trying to do an extra special good job on the assignment that I had given him, and I slapped him in the face for it. Philippians 2, 6 through 8. Who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. I was too caught up in my own power, my own needs, to acknowledge that this man had tried really hard to do something special for me, to impress me, even if it went wrong. So if we do it with all our heart, we are honest. If we do it with all our heart, we find joy. If we do it with all our heart, we do the best job we can. And if we do it with all our heart, we serve. We serve God, and we do it by serving his people. And every person is his people. I want you to know something about leadership. We hear a lot about it today in our world. Great leadership is serving. God bless.